Hello YouTube, Johnny Ray 88 here, and today I'm going to be going over how to do an oil change on a 1986 vf700c Honda V45 Magna. Okay, the first step of the job will be obviously to look at your owner's manual and figure out what kind of oil you're going to need. And for the 1986 vf700c, it calls for 10W40 motorcycle engine oil. And then you also need to, read through and see what the owner's manual recommends for, or the service manual recommends for this particular motorcycle. And then the next step will be to procure your engine oil, obviously, and oil filter. For this oil change, I'll be using the Wix oil filter, part number 51334. I've never used this before. This is my first oil change on the motorcycle. So we'll see how well that works. Hopefully it works well. Every site I've looked at to compare different engine oil filters for this motorcycle says I can use that oil filter. And then next, you're going to need your engine oil. For this oil change, I'll be using the Castrol Activo Extra 4T 10W40 motorcycle engine oil. Whatever you do, when you get your motorcycle, your oil for your motorcycle, make sure that it meets some sort of JASO specification. That's to make sure that the engine oil is formulated for motorcycle use, and that's important especially in the 86 vf700c because it does have a wet clutch in the transmission, and the oil is shared between the transmission and the engine. And then after that, you're going to need to gather the tools you're going to need for the job. For this specific job, you are going to need some means of removing the filter. It's kind of tight, and it's next to one of the headers. So unless you want to get burned, I recommend using a tool for that. And then next, you are going to need a 10mm socket or wrench and a 17mm socket or wrench and corresponding ratchets if you use sockets. Because on the 86 vf700c, you have your 17mm drain plug here, back behind this, and then here you have a 10mm drain plug on your head. To ensure proper draining of the engine oil, you must also remove this. Oil pools up here around the head, and if you don't remove that, you don't drain all of the old oil out. Okay, so first, I'll be starting by removing my drain plug. One thing I'd like to go ahead and mention now before we get started is make sure that you warm your motorcycle up before you perform the oil change, preferably up to 5 minutes, just to make sure that the oil is warm and able to run well so that you can evacuate the engine of the engine oil well. Go ahead and crack her loose here. And loosen her the rest of the way by hand. Well, if it complies. Best to make sure to have sharp towels before you do this, because you will get oil on your hand if you're as sloppy as I am. And all over the place. Probably as well. Set that to the side. Next, we're going to get in here and take out the oil filter. That header is very hot. Ouch. Like I said, you want something to get in here because you don't want to burn yourself on that header or that one. As clumsy as I am, that's hard not to do. Yeah. Well, assuming that your tools decide to cooperate, it's probably, I was trying to be quick about this. It's best to line this thing up by hand. It doesn't like to cooperate when you just have it on the tool. Tighten her up. I have to say, I absolutely love this filter tool. It is a great investment. This thing has helped me in so many tight spots. Next, go ahead and finish removing the oil filter. Try not to get a bunch of oil on my header. Don't want to smell burnt oil all the time. Go ahead and let it drip out a little bit, and then drop it down in the pan. And finally, the head drain plug up here. If I can give you a good view of it. If I can get my little cheap tripod to cooperate. There we go. And this is probably going to be hot. Oh, no, not really. Position the pan a little better for this, because it is going to hit this chrome, but I don't care, because this is a commuter bike. It's not a show bike. It's not a... I don't care about how pretty it is. I just have it to get the gas mileage and enjoy riding. Yes, you can see there's quite a bit of oil in that head. A good little amount there. Then once this gets done dripping, we'll come back, reinstall all of the plugs. Okay, so I've already reinstalled my head drain plug, my oil filter, and my crankcase drain plug. And I want to add that when you reinstall these, make sure that you do not over-torque any of these. Especially this guy here, just snug it up really good. Don't over-torque it. And when you're reinstalling the oil filter, it helps to put a little bit of oil on the sill to help keep it from binding as you're reinstalling the oil filter. Most people already know that. And on your drain plugs, there's a washer on them, a metallic washer. Make sure that's in good shape when you go to reinstall your drain plugs. And now we're finally at the point where we can go ahead and start filling her back up. Right here at your engine fill port. I didn't mention this earlier, but I like to remove my fill cap when I'm draining the oil. You know, help Make sure there's no vacuum inside the engine, keeping the oil from draining out quickly enough. I think I mentioned this earlier. It calls for 3.2 quarts of oil. And now that you've already introduced your first 3 quarts of oil, go ahead and start the bike. And allow the oil to fill the oil filter and the void in the head that you drained earlier. That you're not leaking anywhere. And yes, that is a different drain plug. I had to replace it because the previous owner cross-threaded the previous drain plug. So we're looking good here. So we'll go ahead and shut her off and check our oil level and see where we're at. Per Honda specification, they say to unscrew this and just stick it in and see where you're at. And according to this, we're still a little on the low side, so we'll go ahead and add some more. Remember, after your first 3 quarts, you only need a little bit more for the additional 0.2. And that's it. She is full. And that completes your oil change on your 86 vf700c.